Joining me now is former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bondi Partners. You know him well, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, thanks for joining me this 4th of July weekend. And it has finally happened. Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill is going to be a big, beautiful law. It's passed the U.S. House of Representatives before the president's 4th of July deadline. And you know the president knows how to make it a show. Here's how he's going to sign it.
They're going to be very proud tomorrow. So we're signing at about 5 o'clock, and at about 5 o'clock we're going to have B-2s and F-22s and F-35s flying right over the White House. And the Speaker and I and John Thune, we're all there together with I think most Republican senators and congressmen and women, and it's going to be a great day. So we'll be signing with those beautiful planes flying right over our head.
Mick, it's not just a bill signing, it's an air show. But break it down for our viewers. What is in this bill, and why is it so important to the president's agenda?
Yeah, James, we could talk about the 4th of July all night if you wanted to, but
I'd love to.
We do the same. Suppose we do the same on the bill. The bill's over 1,000 pages, but it's got a lot of attention in the last couple of weeks for the impact and the deficit, and that is serious. We can talk about that if you like. But what got sort of lost in all of the discussion in the last several weeks was all of the substantive legislation about the Trump agenda. So things on immigration, things on trade, all the things he's been talking about are also in this bill. That's why he called it the one big, beautiful bill. This wasn't just a spending tax bill. It had a lot of other things in it.
Yeah, and so break it down for us, though, particularly around things such as, what is it going to do? Because he's already had a huge success when it comes to the border. There's no illegal migrants closing the southern border, but he's also giving, I think, something like $150 billion more to border enforcement. Talk us through that and tell us what wound up happening with that provision that was controversial. We talked about it in the parliamentarian in the Senate about what happened with the plan to exclude illegal migrants from Medicaid. Did that get through? Is that also in the bill?
Yeah, no, the thing the Republicans wanted in there is not there. They're not going to be able to deny as broadly illegal immigrants the Medicaid benefits. They still will have a process for doing so, but it wasn't going to be as dramatic as they had hoped. On what Trump is doing, and it's a fair question to ask, I guess. Why are you spending all this money on this wall if you don't have a problem anymore at the border? Because technically we probably don't. Here's the answer, James. His policies can be undone. The next Democrat comes, changes all the policies, and all of a sudden we have this huge rush at the border. It's really, really difficult, not impossible, really difficult for a future Democrat administration to take down a wall that is already there. And I think that's why that's important. This is one of the more lasting impacts of the Trump agenda.
Yeah, no, that's right. And it's interesting because I noted in the Wall Street Journal just a little while ago, they've reported that Joe Biden has come out of his hidey hole, not on The View, but he went and he gave a speech to, of all things, a Human Resources Professionals Association, which I guess shows kind of how far his star has fallen. But he lamented in his talk that so many things that he had done were being undone, and that that his legacy is kind of, the implication was now over. Has this bill undone much of the Biden, but not just the Biden, even the Obama era agenda that the Democrats tried to impose and lock in permanently on the United States?
Yeah. By the way, don't begrudge Biden that speech too much. My guess is it paid someplace between $1 and $2 million. Pretty good work.
Wow. Yeah.
So on undoing the legacy, yes. Again, a lot of it is in the bill, but it's not as fast as some Republicans wanted. So some of the pullback on the misnamed Inflation Reduction Act, which is really our Green New Deal, will be slower to be drawn back as opposed to faster. Some Republicans wanted to cut it off tomorrow. So there were compromises that were made to get it through the Senate, because the Senate has a lot more moderate members than the House does. But generally speaking, the Trump administration has to look at this across the board as a huge success, even without everything they really wanted.
Yeah, I mean, it is sort of a question of politics being the art of the possible, as they say. Hey, we've also had just breaking news a little while ago that the Supreme Court has given Trump another big win, a 7-2 decision, handing him a win against this lower court that wanted to stop him from deporting, I think it was 8 migrants to Sudan or Somalia. in the decision, the justices basically said they would do whatever they needed to help, the president break through these sorts of logjams, and that gave him the authority and really affirmed that presidential authority. Is this the end now, finally, of this judicial coup that's been going on in the U.S. for the last 6 months?
No, I think what you've seen in the last week or two is the Supreme Court saying to all the lower courts, time to take it easy, boys and girls. You folks are being way too aggressive. That was readily apparent in the decision on universal injunctions earlier this week. But James, you're telling me something I don't know about this case, but you mentioned something very interesting, that the decision was 7-2. There are 6 Republican leading judges and 3 Democrat progressive leaning judges, which means that at least one of those sided with the majority in this decision. And that, I think, can tell you that even the Supreme Court, across even partisan lines, thinks that maybe the attack on the Trump administration has gone too far with the lower courts.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is that fascinating Article 1, Article 3 fight that we've been talking about for the last several months. But, also on the question of Democrats and Trump's opponents going too hard, I also want to bring in this exclusive broken by a great friend of the program, Miranda Devine, in the New York Post, which reveals that President Obama's infamous Trump-Russia collusion report was corrupted by then CIA Director John Brennan, FBI Director James Comey, and Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. It basically said the whole thing was rushed, involved excessive oversight from budget heads, and said the whole thing couldn't have been trusted. Now, we kind of knew this already, but the CIA has basically put it out there and said, we didn't do a great job on this. This is a pretty big vindication now for everything that we talked about back in 2016.
Yeah, and I know folks in this country, folks around the world are going to look at this report and say, oh, well, this is the Trump administration, investigation. Of course, they're going to find this. But I encourage people to read at least the summary and go into it and find out what we found out about ourselves. And one of them is that this Trump derangement syndrome was real and goes back to 2015, 2016. James, it's hard to overstate the lengths to which some very elitist Democrats would go in this country to prevent Donald Trump from being president, up to and including using the power of government to prevent it from happening. So that, yeah, I think a lot of folks are going to be disturbed by these findings. More folks should be disturbed.
Well, Mick, what it says to me is the deep state is real. That deep state term that Trump threw around and a lot of people on the right threw around, and everybody said, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. But they were right?
In a lot of cases, that's turning out to be the case. The Steele dossier was fake, the whole Russia investigation, all of it. Go on the other side of the spectrum, the Hunter laptop, et cetera. Yeah, the attacks on Trump, both in the media and from within his own government, are, again, they're hard to overstate.
Mick Mulvaney, we're going to have to leave it there. Hope you have a great 4th of July. Enjoy the long weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, James.